Well, guys, I'm so glad that you came into counseling today. I think this is going to be great for all of us. You can't really get to know someone until you've walked a mile in their shoes. And in this exercise, we've taken that a step further. We've walked a mile in each other's clothes. Your bravery has been outstanding. Gary, I want to point you out specifically. You've been very brave and honorable. And can I just say you look great? And now you've gained a new perspective on what it's like to be Susan. And Gary, what did you learn from today's exercise?
Absolutely nothing.
Amen. Let me see if you can resonate with this scenario. There's a man named Jack and a woman named Jill. The names have been changed to protect the innocent, of course, or the guilty in this case. It was their 10th wedding anniversary. This is significant. 10's a big one. I mean, this isn't like the leather anniversary. This is the big dog. We're talking a decade of matrimony. This is big. And Jill has some expectations because Jack has forgotten a few of the anniversaries in this time. Surely he doesn't forget number 10. Guys, I hope and pray you've never forgotten one of yours. I did one time, and it won't happen again. But Jack was good, 1 through 5. He was right on it. But then, life got busy. He forgot number 6. He was sure that it wouldn't happen again, and so he was right on for number 7. But then he forgot 8 and 9. And so 10's a big deal. He's got to come up big with the 10th anniversary. And so Jack begins to rack his mind. What can he do that's just going to blow Jill out of the water to remind her that he loves him, or that he loves her. He loves him. He does love him. We all love ourselves pretty good. But he loves her, and he wants to show it. He wants to prove it. And so Jack, he thinks back to the very first date, and he's able to remember. This is significant, ladies, if your man is able to remember where your first date happened, and he was able to pinpoint it. And so he called up the restaurant, and he got reservations. They're happening on the night of the 10th anniversary, and this is a big deal because he's like a week ahead. And most guys, you're good if you plan like the night before, but he's a week ahead right now. And so this is, he's building some momentum. We're getting some chips in his corner. Not only that, but he was also able to remember the exact set of flowers that he got for his wife. Now, ladies, what you need to understand about most guys, not every guy, but most guys, we know 3 kinds of flowers. We know roses, and we know daisies, and we know that there's all the rest of them. But Jack remembered. He remembered what he got her. And so he, on his lunch break, on the day of the anniversary, he left his job. He went and picked up the flowers. He dropped them off at the restaurant. He said, look, as soon as we arrive for our reservation, I want you to bring these flowers out, and it's going to be a fantastic romantic evening. So he works the rest of his day. He gets off work, and he heads by Walmart. He's got to grab an anniversary card to wish her a happy anniversary and to let her know how much he loves them. And after searching through the gazillions of cards that exist for these kind of occasions, he finds the one. If Jack were a wordsmith, and were he able to accurately find a card that just puts all of his emotions and thoughts into one scenario, it was this card. It was perfect. He knew that she was just going to melt, and they were going to have a fantastic romantical evening together. It's going to be off the chain, or so he thinks. So he gets home, and Jill is busy. She's been attending to the various things within the house that day. And he sneaks in behind her, and he gets to the back of the house where he pulls out the card, and he begins to sign his name. And since Jack's a sensitive guy, he draws hearts around his name, and that matters apparently. And so I was told it did. Does it not? It does, okay. So with the hearts by his name, he tucks it in the envelope, and then he then walks out into the living room where he meets Jill, and he hands her the card. And Jill, she's so excited because he remembered the big oaf got it right this time. And so like her eyes are full of life and excitement, and she's got this big old smile on her face. And so she rips open the envelope, and she begins to dig into the card. And then all of a sudden, Jack, because he's a sensitive guy, remember, begins to notice that something isn't right, because the life in her eyes begins to darken and the smile leaves her face. And he says, what's wrong? She said, oh, it's nothing. And he says, no, sweetie pie, sugar, insert, sugar lips, whatever it is you call her. What's wrong? I know something's wrong. You're obviously not okay. What's happening here? And she says, no, really, we just, let's just go about our evening. And he says, no, if I did something wrong, you need to let me know so I can correct it. We need to have a healthy relationship. And she said, well, it's a really good card for a birthday card. He says, what? There's got to be some mistake. And he takes it and he looks at it and she says, no, the only mistake here is you. And he says, of course, because he's feeling guilty, but like all guys who feel guilty, he gets a little defensive in the moment. Well, it was an honest mistake. You got to cut me some slack here. And she said, cut you some slack? This is our 10th anniversary. Of course it was an honest mistake because you honestly, mistakenly think that you care about me. That was intense. That was a shot. She said, what if you took your 1955 insert, nice car here because I don't know much about cars, but insert it there, and you took it to the shop and you were getting a paint job done and they got one of the stripes just a quarter of an inch off. You would come unglued. Why? Because you care about that car and you know that car, every inch of that car. You're familiar with that car, but you don't know every inch of me and you're not familiar with me, so you don't care about me. It's a pretty intense argument. And then Jack, like most guys who have now been hurt and are now angry, reverts back to just repeating himself. Well, it was an honest mistake. Cut me some slack, all right? She says, you know what? I think I'm done. And he says, you know what? I think you deserved a birthday card for our anniversary. They both storm off to their ends of the house, him looking out the window, her looking out her window, both wondering, how on earth did we end up here? I don't know if that hits home for any of you, maybe all of it or just a piece of it, but that's how a lot of arguments go if you're married. Two very well-intentioned, loving, honorable people can go from super awesome to hate each other, want to slit your throat, just like that. In a matter of 5 minutes, their entire evening was devastated. No dinner was had together. No plans were shared. This is a fictional story, of course, but it rings true for so many of us, whether we like to admit it or not. So I want to talk today about communication. And in this series, Fixing Us, we're going to be talking about several different topics. This week is communication. Next week is Valentine's Day on Sunday. Guys, one of the sexiest things you can do for your wife is get her to church on Sunday. Do it. Lead her well, and you'll see how she responds to that. We're going to be talking about intimacy. You don't want to miss that. You do want to check your kids into Kids Ignited because they don't want to hear what we've got to talk about today because that's not for them yet, but we will be talking about intimacy. We're also going to be talking about believing the best in your spouse. And continuing to pursue your spouse. Those are the 4 weeks of the series, but it all stems off of communication. If you have your Bibles, Matthew 19 is our text this morning. You can open it up. If you didn't bring a Bible, you can follow along on the screen. Matthew 19. They say that money is the number one cause of divorce, but it's really, the truth is it's communication about money, or it's communication about intimacy, or it's communication about the kids, or about parenting, or about the job that leads to a lot of the heartache and troubles and frustration within relationships. We struggle to communicate. And so I want to take it to Jesus, and Jesus is going to point out some things that may seem pretty obvious. They may be some, well, of course, Mark, duh, kind of statements, but if they were significant enough for Jesus to point out, then they're significant enough for us to take note of this morning. So Matthew chapter 19, verses 4, 5, and 6 is where we're going to start. Some Pharisees have come to Jesus, some teachers of the law, and they're coming to Jesus, and they're asking him about divorce. Is it lawful for us to divorce our spouse for any and every reason? Moses said, just give her a certificate of divorce, and it'll be good to go. But Jesus, again, he's talking about something that's going to be significant to us today because we all know divorce happens for lack of communication, for lack of caring, for lack of something, so there's hurt there. We need to communicate better. And so this is what Jesus has to say in reply to that. And he said, haven't you read, verse 4? Haven't you read, he replied, at the beginning the Creator made them male and female, and said, for this reason a man will leave his father and mother, and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one. Therefore, what God has joined together, let man not separate. The very first point this morning I want to make is that God made us different. We're incredibly different. And now that seems pretty obvious, but this is significant enough for Jesus to point out. He made them male and he made them female. Translation, you're different. You're different. You're wildly different. You're emotionally different, and your outlooks are different, and your perspectives are different, and you're wired to be different. Let's face it, guys. When it comes to our emotions, we resemble very closely a brick wall. We're hard. Women, when it comes to emotions, not always, but some women, they're more like a beanbag chair. Very soft. Very easy to offend. They're very sensitive. Not wrong, just sensitive. Guys aren't wrong for being hard. That's just who they are. They're wiring. They're made different. Not only are we physically different, but we've just been made and created by a creator to be different. And it's not bad, but here's why this is significant, and this is why we need to point it out, because sometimes in our relationships and our attempts to communicate with our spouse or a significant other, we will, like as a guy, I will have a tendency to approach Katie and communicate to her like she's a guy, because I know how to talk to guys. When I sit and talk to women, I will talk to them like I'm talking to a guy and expect them to perceive what I'm saying as a guy would perceive it. So some of the things I say are very blunt and to the point, and they end up being hurtful. And that wasn't my intention, but that's just the reality of the situation because I'm communicating to a woman the way I would communicate to a guy. Ladies, do you have the same situation? Thinking back, guys, we prefer side-by-side relationships. I will sit next to a guy at a Kansas City Royals baseball game, and we won't say a word to each other, but we'll cheer and grunt when calls do and don't go our way, and at the end of the game, it's going to be the best time I ever spent with a guy. Yeah. And on the way home, I might slap him on the tuchus and say, good game, let's do it again. Best time ever. Girls are going to have face-to-face conversations. And if you're a guy involved in a face-to-face conversation, you know this is work because you have to pay attention and you have to reciprocate and you have to respond appropriately. It's not an appropriate response. This is difficult. We're different. God made us different. Not bad, not one better than the other, simply different. Our emotions, our outlook, our perspectives, and our wiring is completely different. We've got some boxes that are going to come on the stage. We're going to stack for an illustration. But Jesus didn't stop at just pointing out the fact that we're different. Jesus went on to say that a man will leave his father and mother. The implication is not just that a man would leave his father and mother, but that a woman would also leave her father and her mother. The idea is that you're leaving your formation, what has helped to shape and mold who you are, the ones that helped you determine what cultures you value, how you celebrate certain holidays, what traditions you value, what traditions you just want to kick to the curb. When a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, he is leaving everything that has helped shape him to be united to someone who's leaving everything that helped shape her. So not only are we different already, but we're leaving our different backgrounds and our different situations and our different circumstances, and it's going to be difficult because there are some situations, some circumstances that helped form and shape him, some hurts and some successes, some victories, and some life experiences that have helped make him who he is, that help us understand why he values what he values. And likewise, there are some life situations and circumstances, some good things and some bad things, some positives and negatives that have helped mold and shape and form who she is. Not bad, but they are what they are. So we have her and we have him. And each one of these boxes represents part of their formation, what brought them here, what has shaped them and molded them, their culture and their values, their experiences and their situations in life that has helped define their personality, who they are and who they're not. So we have her, and him will be here in a second. He's always late to the party. It's all right. Earlier this week, I was trying to explain to the staff what I had in my head that I wasn't able to explain well, and so we set these boxes up on stage, and he was very straight and slender, and for whatever reason, all the boxes that were tall like this, they had been laid on their side like this for her, and so while he was very tall and skinny, she was shorter and wider, and Katie came in, and that was the first thing she noticed. She said, "What are you saying about women?" I said, "Katie, baby, I love you. She's a curvy. Don't see straight lines and points. Those are curves. Love you and your curves." She didn't buy it. So we have him and we have her. There she is. The writing on the boxes and the orientation of the boxes was completely unintentional. Please don't be offended by it. But this is my next point, is that because of our backgrounds and our experiences, our hurts and even our successes, communication becomes jumbled. And here's why. Let me demonstrate, if I may. She will stand on her side of the box, and she will say something like, "Love you, babe." Now, she's speaking that through her experience, through her formation, through everything that makes her her, and he's on his side, and he's translating "love you, babe" through all of his life experiences. He's running it through the filter of what has made him him, and so he's thinking there, he just heard "love you, babe," but what he hears, like what he interprets is, "Hey, we're on good terms right now, that's good." That's what he hears. This is why communication between him and her can be jumbled. Let's take this a step farther, okay? He's been working long hours. Challenges at work are getting intense, and so he comes home and she says, "You're never home anymore. Why aren't you ever home anymore? I got all this stuff going on, and I'm so busy right now, and I need you to help me to take up some of the workload." And all he hears, nag, 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 nag. I hate you, stop being stupid, do better. That's what he hears. What she means is, I miss you and I need your help. That's what she means. I just want to be with you. But that's not what he hears. Here's why that's not what he hears. I wrote it down so I wouldn't have to remember it. When she criticizes, he hears contempt. Because through his life experience in a very performance-driven world where he lives and he works and he survives, he hears criticism as contempt. I don't like you, you're not doing a good job, you need to do better. That's what work has taught him to believe when he hears criticism. So instead of saying anything back, he's just silent because he thinks, well, I'd rather not say anything at all than insert my foot into my mouth. But she hears silence and she hears hostility. He's being silent right now. He's being hostile towards me. He's giving me the silent treatment. That's just another form of manipulation. So I'm just going to respond back with, and it just continues on. Do you see why communication is so difficult? Because she's speaking through her experiences, and she is also interpreting through her experiences, and he is speaking through his experiences and interpreting through his experiences. This is a potentially disastrous, chaotic mess. So what do we do? How do we navigate these situations and circumstances that seem so disastrous to our relationships? When she is saying something that seems so clear to her, but he's hearing something completely different, and so they just end up repeating themselves as if saying it louder is going to mean something different. I used to fight that way with Katie. My volume would increase and increase, but I'd keep saying the same old thing, thinking maybe she didn't hear me right the first time, so if I say it louder, then maybe she'll really understand what I'm saying. But that's not the case at all. The thing that needs to happen is that as the man, as the leader of the relationship, that he would take the initiative to realize we are fighting a losing battle by you saying what you're saying and me trying to interpret what you're saying, because guys are grown up to believe that when she speaks, she's not actually saying what she's saying. I'm supposed to read between the lines, and all of a sudden I realized that was happening in my marriage. Katie would say something to me, and my experience with women was that, well, when they say what they're saying, they're not actually saying what they're saying. She means something different. So I'm constantly trying to interpret what Katie's saying, and all the while, Katie was actually just saying what she meant. But it was jumbled because of my experiences. So what Katie and I began to do, when in preparation for this series, we had one of the most difficult months of our marriage recently when we were trying to just communicate. I mean, it finally dawned on me, we just need to meet on middle ground. And so I asked Katie if I could bring her hurt, and if she could bring her hurt, and we could just meet in the middle. I'll step out from behind my wall of trying to interpret what she's saying, and she'll step out behind her wall of trying to interpret what I'm saying, and she'll quit trying to speak through her experiences, and I'll quit trying to speak through my experiences, and we'll just meet in the middle. The middle ground is praying ground, where we get on our knees and we begin to pray to the God of the universe, because he's the only one that can really make sense of the muddled mess that we've made. And so getting down on our knees, we begin to pray together that the God would give us the wisdom and the intelligence and the grace to see these situations for what they really are, not marriage-ending meltdowns that result in fisticuffs, but what they really are is attempts for us, opportunities for us to grow together in the grace of God as we deal with these situations one at a time. You see, it's entirely possible that as you pray, something along the lines of, God, give us the grace and the mercy and the wherewithal to see where they're coming from. It's entirely possible, because God can do anything. God could come in like Miley Cyrus on a wrecking ball and just shove this thing over. He could do that. He could totally do that. My hope and my prayer is that he doesn't. Not just because Miley Cyrus is ridiculous, but because if God doesn't knock your walls down, And if God doesn't take your hurt and your formation and just shove it down, if he doesn't do that, the reason he doesn't do that is because he wants you and your spouse or your significant other to begin to tackle these issues, these hurts, and these formations one issue at a time. And as you tackle them one at a time, you begin to grow trust with one another. As you begin to trust them with some of your past hurts and experiences and some of the formations and why you believe what you believe, as you begin to trust them with that, all of a sudden you begin to work together as one cohesive unit. You see, in the end, at the end of verse 6, put verse 6 back on the screen if you can, please. When Jesus said, a man will leave his father and mother and the two will become one flesh, it's right there. So they're no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate. A better translation of let no one separate is let no one cut apart. See, when Jesus said that the two will become one flesh, the person that has the most authority in your marriage to cut each other apart is you. Colossians chapter 4 and verse 6 is where I want to land this message. I don't think God is going to annihilate your walls. I think he's going to allow you and your spouse to meet on middle ground. Not on his side, on her side, but you meet him and her all the way in the middle. And you begin to deal with issues, one issue at a time. And as you deal with one issue at a time, you begin to grow trust. And as you grow trust, there's intimacy, not necessarily physical intimacy, but there's emotional intimacy, there's relational intimacy that begins to grow each other towards each other. But this happens when we put Colossians chapter 4 and verse 6 into practice. This is what it says: let your conversations be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. Let your conversations be full of grace and seasoned with salt. Let's clarify that. Full of grace, first of all, means that they're kind. Guys, please hear this, that they're kind. That when she comes to you and she's had a rough day and she needs to say something to you, but you've also had a pretty rough day at work, and she says your name, you don't respond with, "What?" That's not graceful. That's not kind. There's nothing loving about that response. What you could say is, "Hey man, I had a really rough day. Can you just give me a minute?" That's pretty nice. And maybe she can't give you a minute. And then that's when you need to realize that you weren't in this marriage to really fulfill your own needs anyway. The reason you should have gotten married was to fulfill hers. It's not about what you can get out of the relationship, it's what you can bring to it. And you can bring grace, you can bring kindness. And so having a conversation that is full of grace means that it's kind and it's also sensitive. Guys, I know this is like a rough word for guys because most of us are totally not sensitive and we'd rather punch a wall than talk about sensitivity. But to be sensitive to your spouse means to listen and then also literally listen and understand where she's coming from. This is what we need to understand. To not make an attempt to understand, accommodate, and love your spouse is to show hate, disdain, and disrespect for yourself because you're one flesh. And so when you don't make an attempt to hear them out, to understand them, to be sensitive and kind, then you've just kicked yourself in the butt because you're one flesh. To be full of grace is kind and sensitive. To use your words to be purposeful. To be purposeful for the attempts to build each other up. That they would be kind and gentle and loving, and they would be spoken. The truth would be spoken. That it would be done with grace. That you would compliment them. That you would be thoughtful. But here's the other one I want to talk about. So when you're having these conversations, as you meet in the middle ground, you may think her hurts are stupid. You may think his hurts are ridiculous. But as you begin to deal with them, as you have a conversation that's full of grace, but then it's also seasoned with salt. You see, before refrigeration and freezers, salt existed as a method of preserving foods. It would make them last longer. So what they're saying here is that your conversations be full of grace and seasoned with salt. Salt also brings out taste and adds flavor. But it's also a method of preserving. Let your words be the kind of words that preserve the relationship, not assassinate their character, not draw aim at who they are and what their intentions were, but that you aim to preserve the relationship by the words that you speak, by the grace that you give. And so also letting your words season it with, so it brings out the flavor. So that means, again, you're going to compliment and you're going to acknowledge and you're going to realize, hey, they bring something to this relationship and it's not their fault that this relationship has gone wrong. I'm going to own what I own and the mistakes that I've made and realize that I have hurt just as much as they have hurt and I have unresolved conflict just as much as they do. And so we're just going to meet in the middle and we're going to begin to trust that the God of the universe is able to be the great physician, not just physically, but also emotionally and relationally, that he can heal the hurt that exists and he can mend what has been broken, and he can begin to restore us to the purpose that he created in the first place. Let your conversations be full of grace and seasoned with salt. In your attempts this week to communicate with one another, and we all know that trouble is out there. You're either coming out of trouble or you're going into trouble, or it's just looming somewhere ominously in the distance. When it comes to relationships, whether it's this month or next month, trouble will come. And your response is your responsibility. How you choose to deal with the chaos of life with your significant other is entirely up to you. Will it be full of grace and seasoned with salt, or will you just continue to revert back to, and when I say you, I'm talking about me too, will we continue to revert back into our old habits of becoming defensive and angry and emotional? It's up to you. My prayer has been, in preparation for this series, that as we journey through the difficulties of relationships and the complexities that come with them, that our hearts and our minds would genuinely be open to learning something from the Spirit, a different way of going about our marriages and relationships, because for a lot of us, what we've been doing hasn't been working, and we've just been miserable in our relationships